Hello, Bill Kovacevic here again, welcoming you to installation, module 11. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, the installation of signs. A lot of you might think of it as being the grunge part of it, but it's usually installations are the culmination, and the exciting part of any sign project is putting it together and making it happen, as it were. And some of my favorite people and people that have influenced me and helped me in this sign business have been installers, extraordinarily resourceful people. And I pay tribute to just when I started in the business, sign companies were beginning to get cranes and trucks and getting decent equipment and safer equipment. What I've illustrated there is how they used to put up blade signs. Imagine before you put up a blade sign, you had to shinny up the roof and with sandbags so that you can put some kind of a trestle and to support the lifting of these blade signs. This was all done manually, hard, strong labor. That's a picture of a truck, a typical sign truck in those days before cranes. These were the pioneers. So when I started in the business and I wanted to know everything there was about installations, I had signs at a times to go through, and I would go through every one of those. And one of the ones that stuck around and sort of stirred my imagination, it's always been Stardust. It was the culmination of everything a designer would have wanted to do, and envy those designers that lived in Las Vegas where money was no object. But they were at the same time an extraordinarily excellent school, because contrary to what it is today, signs at the times, unfortunately, they would document these major projects and I would devour them. This is one of my favorite ones, and I'm sharing it with you because it sort of tells you the whole story from drawing board through the end, and the diligent, the diligence with which they wanted to make that design come through is still legendary. From the concrete base, massive concrete bases, to those gigantic redographs, changeable letters. Can you imagine? The Stardust was famous for having its own glass room within the sign, so that when you had to change a tube, you didn't have to rush to the shop. You actually did it on site. They had their own glass room and their team being able to maintain this gigantic sign. They destroyed this sign. They demolished it some years ago. They're rebuilding a new one, probably a glitzy RGB, but it's still a classic. These are some of the shots in the shop itself, putting this massive structure together, gigantic process. And imagine how many thousands of feet of neon tubing and wiring went into it. I've got these statistics somewhere, but we'll not go through them. It's not important. Today, of course, it's all RGB, it's all LED, and this would have been done in a flash. But it's still a remarkable job. When signs were allowed to rotate and revolve, it was loads of fun. I did a lot of them, and unfortunately I couldn't find, other than BP's and oil companies, Texaco signs that I worked on. But this is one that sort of shows the challenges of putting up rotating signs. Imagine you've got 4 major advertisers rotating at the same time, while that big one at the top also rotating. It's one of those great signs that we'll never ever see again. No archaeologist will ever be able to dig this one out. This is the ultimate in installations, sign installations. This again is I go back to in talking about architects and designers. It's when you get to know them and understand the architecture, the principles of curtain wall design, you can get away with some things. In the preceding module, I had discussed the challenges of using materials when all others fail and can't be done, and how to incorporate materials. So we won't talk about it, but we'll talk about the installation of this particular one. The sign was only 4 3/4 inches thick, and it was 24, 25 feet in diameter. And how the side street was too narrow to put up a crane, much too narrow, and it was on a hill, on an incline. And the major thoroughfare at the front of the building was Sherbrooke Street, very busy street. So how do you put this animal up there? The scaffolding could only support 400 pounds maximum, and these signs, it was a challenge. So what we decided to do, we were going to make a jig. That jig template, we would build these signs in two parts, two halves. And the key to supporting this thing would be the spandrels. You call me talking about spandrels, that's the area that covers the concrete flooring. And in red, I show you the area of attachment to support these things. So we designed a jig, a mounting jig, that would raise these two halves along the tracks, the scaffolding tracks. All curtain wall buildings have to have a track. And the crane would be positioned on the main street on the side, and we would slide the sign halves all the way up to the top to the exposed sections where the spandrels were removed for the plates that were prior to that were attached to the concrete fascia. It went off without a hitch. We were worried about the issue of wind, of course, but pushing and putting the halves right up against the curtain wall and having it secured by this jig, mounting jig, did the trick. And the operation was carried out very early in the morning on a Sunday morning, so that the traffic was not going to be disrupted. And it went, as I said, without a hitch. And it's still there today. This sign was put up in 1994, I believe, and has since been updated to LEDs. But it's still one of my favorite and most important challenges that we designed. And this is where design comes into play. You design the installation as well as designing the sign. Here's a study of a mullion-free. When you talk to installation people, it's also important to understand the fenestration industry, the people that actually make these mullions. And this is a sketch that came off from a site meeting, again with a mullionless windows. And you pick up a lot. You're looking for ways to put in studs into these special mullions to be able to support a sign of any kind, of any type. And the expedient one was the one that the fenestration people kind of astonished me. And then a much more secure one from our standpoint, because I prefer to have bolts come out rather than just blades, but both are just as adequate. But this is the kind of discussion as a designer, as salespeople, or all the professionals within in production should understand, to have a common interest in understanding fenestration, because that, right, what you see here is the future of sign making, is to be able to accommodate new architectural details and features. Adapting to, this is an old one. This is way before, at least 40 years ago. And what makes this one particularly unique is we used corrugated metal to be able to conform to the radius corners. That building has since been converted from a brewery to the High Technology Institute of Quebec. Now, Lord of the Rings, call it Lord of the Rings. I hope we're not going to get sued for this, but this was the Olympic Rings project, and it was, what you see here are very early sketches that came off what an architect had proposed, a very straightforward steel beam structures to be able to support this, to lean over the penthouse of this 32-story building. And this is where it's where I suggested to the client in this meeting. It was a real rush job, that perhaps to eliminate the appearance of a heavy structure, that we could perhaps use curved steel pipes that would come off from the penthouse, that set back some several feet. So we started with sketches. You start out the dialogue with what's possible, and these are some of preliminary sketches when we were considering of illuminating these rings. As it turned out, after going through all of these exercises and then discovering from the customer, with further verification with people in Switzerland, the actual International Olympic Committee, that Olympic rings are intended to be, first of all, they don't interlock, overlap. They must be on one single pane. It's only a color distinction. So that played an important role. Considering also that one of the rings is black, and how do you illuminate that at night, and so on. So these are preliminary sketches. We'll go through them. Before they were illuminating and making them round was nixed ultimately by the Olympic Committee. What they want is absolutely flat, as clean and as simple as possible, actually. So all of these sketches went for naught, but it was important because they established credibility with the client immediately. They got the right company to address whatever was possible. These were the originals, or that looked at it from the perspective of making them all illuminated. So we went through different types of cold forming polycarbonate and clamping to ball and mandrel shaped tubes and so on. But we ultimately ended up, what was going to be approved by the International Olympic Committee was just a flat, straightforward structure, and making it as elegant, as clean as possible. These are some sketches that show paint. The gloss factor was going to be extremely important here, because they were going to be indirectly illuminated. And indirectly illuminated, we didn't want glare. We were concerned about, the effects of the distortion, the visual distortion from a great distance. So establishing gloss factor for reflection, reflectivity, and so on, we made these mock-ups, and we installed them on the penthouse roof, and a wide variety. The lighting portion was assigned to another company. We wanted to do it, but for political reasons, they did it. In any event, we had to work with them to establish the correct intensity and reflectivity of the colors. These are some of the scenes from the Edmundston plant. They did a fantastic job under duress and under, the quality of the work was amazing. Particularly when these rings came off the trucks, and the customers looked at firsthand. They were astonished to see that they were just impeccably put together. I deliberately reduced the size and the profile of this thing. It was my intention that, given its exposure high up and the high winds, and the fear of icicling and water repellents and so on, that we wanted this to be as aerodynamic as possible and self-cleaning as possible. So we finished with a 4-inch depth, beautifully structured and welded together, and attached to these ball and mandrel shaped flared tubing supports that project off the wall. And here's the intention, and as you can see, what the idea behind making curved supports means, is that they're as inobtrusive as possible. I didn't have it's a shame I couldn't show you the original architectural support system, but it would have essentially been a square rectangle supporting these three rings, whereas this way we're getting more of the rings and less of the support system. It was quite a challenge. There's a video of this project, and the team here in Montreal and from Edmonton did a fantastic job. The clients and the people around this project were completely amazed and astounded. The efficiency, the proficiency, and the how beautifully this thing went up. There were two of these. One set was smaller than the other. But it is one of the classic installations of which I'm proud of to have been part of, and backed up with a fantastic installation and fabrication team. Here I've thrown this in, that when you do installations, sometimes it's the crazy little things that sometimes crop up to make life difficult for you. And in light of the fact that we're now, most sign companies are asked to remove old channel letters with neon neon tubing, and most channel letters would have two holes per letter for the housings, and usually 3 inches apart. So when you remove this, you'd have the ghosting of the old letters. And how do you remove these things without causing major construction? And this is a technique that, when I say that, you pick up a lot from your installers. These are techniques that I'm putting in as a gesture of my appreciation to these to installers, of how to eliminate and make these holes disappear once you've taken the letters off. So two systems that I show you here. It's not unlike repairing a hole in a gyprock. If you ever punched a gyprock wall and made a hole in it because you were angry, well, you know how to fix it up. This is a much more delicate way of doing it, but it works beautifully, and it makes for a very happy customer. Not only were you able to make him a nice new sign, but you got rid of vestiges and the witnessing of the older signs. Just another example. Well, thank you for this. I enjoyed sharing these two great installation projects with you, and I'm looking forward to Module 12.